All right, Molo Sanbonani, hello, how's it? Good evening, good evening, good evening. It is a Wednesday at just past 7:30. You know what that means. The Big Daddy Liberty Show is on your screens. Welcome to it. My name is Usihle Ngobese, aka Big Daddy Liberty. And of course, as is usual, if you like any of the shows that we're producing, whether it's Vugana's show, the Big Daddy Liberty Show, or indeed Liberty and Friends, which comes to you on Sundays, then do me a favor. Hit that like button. Yebo, do it right now. Smash that like button if you're watching on X, YouTube, Instagram, or on Facebook. Welcome to it. And a reminder to you, if you are watching on YouTube in particular, help grow my subscriber numbers by subscribing to the channel and joining the over 43,000, I think now, subscribers that we have on there. Last but not least, we have been having issues with our website, but our website is bigdaddyliberty.com or .co.za. I've got the tech gurus working on that in the background, especially because rather the website will also help you follow the upcoming national tour that we're going to be doing from next week. I'm hitting the road, and the first stop is KwaZulu Natal. It was meant to be Limpopo, but I don't think I'll have time to do every single province. I'm probably going to do 7 of the 9 provinces, talking to you, the faith, flag, family, and freedom type South African, asking you, obviously, are you going to vote? And if so, what are the real issues that are defining what kind of South Africa you want this to be, right? So what are the issues you're facing, and what South Africa can be tour is what we're going to be discussing. So look out for that as we hit the road from next week. More information and details coming pretty soon. Remember, guys, hit that like button, please, if you are joining us, and share. Let your friends know we are on air, because tonight we unpack an issue that will affect every single one of us. As I said in the promo to this video, elections have consequences. I'm going to say that again, because for a lot of people, they think it's just a public holiday and a day to mark an X. No. Elections have consequences. And what we're going to discuss tonight is the potential consequences and effects of election outcomes, possible election outcomes to our economy. Now, if you're an average South African like anybody else, you might be not doing so well right now, financially or economically, because things are looking bad. It has been 30 years of ANC misadministration that has seen our economy nearly pretty much tank, and find a lot of people who maybe before 10, 20 years ago, who thought they were okay financially, suddenly finding themselves become the sort of government dependents or poor people that they never thought they would be. That is a reality for a lot of South Africans. But again, don't let me waffle on about this. Let me bring my guests on, very eminent guests tonight, economist and a economic analyst, a voice who I look to for all things libertarian and Austrian economic viewpoint orientated. I'm talking, of course, about Bheki Mahlobo. There he is on screen. Bheki, Baba, good evening.
Sihle, Baba, it's a pleasure to be here after a while. I'm looking forward to the fruitful discussion we'll have, man.
Absolutely. Welcome to it. This is the Big Daddy Liberty Show. Here's another familiar face, someone who is perhaps one of the more louder voices in this country when it comes to advocating for personal responsibility, a market economy, a democracy that reflects a will for freedom in our society. I'm talking, of course, about Phumlani Majozi, political analyst and analyst extraordinaire. How's that for an intro, Phumlani? Good evening, Baba.
Sounds very good. I like it. I really like it. Well, I have a flu, man. It's very bad. But for you, I said, Big Daddy Liberty Show. I'm going to make it.
Hey, Tada, thank you so much. And I appreciate that from you guys. Let's hop straight into it, because as we're watching this tonight, how I framed the show is, if you look at the polling, whether it's polling by SRF, the Social Research Foundation, IOL, LOL, has their own polling, Ipsos, I can name a few others. It all points to the reality being post 2024, post 29 May, there likely will be a coalition government in this country. And there are really two broad schools of thought, two broad options, if you will, that South Africans have. On the one side of the equation, is the broadly called multi-party coalition, or the Moonshot Pact, the sort of coalition of DA, IFP, Freedom from Plus, and a few other political parties. These guys, of course, are going to argue that they are the better option for the country. Let's begin here, Phumlani, before I get to the other side of the coalition. Before we get into that, actually, let me begin here, because I want you to maybe chew on this. The economy right now, and when I say the economy, what is the economy? The economy is made up of people, people running businesses, people interacting on a day-to-day basis.
The economist himself, Bheki.
Okay, well, absolutely, let's do that. Let's actually begin there. I think it's a good question. What is the economy? What is it made up of? And why do we say it is worried, or it'll react in a certain way? What do you mean by that sort of rhetoric?
A very good question there, Sihle. And it's something that we can touch on to start the conversation that we'll have today. In terms of the economy, how is the economy performing currently? Where is growth? Where are households? Looking at the conversation that we're having now, it's not looking too good, unfortunately. Growth continues to struggle to grow above 2%. Living conditions have continued to stagnate over the past 10 years. Even so, that not improving to 2019 levels if you look at GDP per capita. The middle income class has shrunk and is in stress, as well as that of consumer spending hasn't been too great if you look at also as well as that of consumer sentiment. The economy as it stands hasn't been performing well. Unemployment is still quite high at 32%, and we see this as well represented with an ANC support at about 40%. These results, the performance of political parties that we see in polling data currently, is representative of the lived experience of South Africans. As South Africans see their lives becoming worse and worse, they tend to not vote for their political parties, in this regard being that of the ANC, where it is now looking at reaching 40%, according to the snapshot seen in polling data currently. So the economy is not doing too good. Not only is the economy not doing too good, but things are quite expensive for households. Inflation is still quite sticky, food as well as that of fuel, as well as that of interest rates. South Africans have been finding the cost of living crisis, high prices, through accessing unsecured loans. And unfortunately, interest rates currently are quite high and appear that they will remain high for quite some time. So households are quite strained, which is not good for the economy, as well as that of in terms of economic policy, that is also hasn't been going in the right direction. And these elections will matter quite the most when it comes to bread and butter issues, the types of coalitions that we see after the May 29th vote, and what it will impact growth, how it impact jobs, how it impact consumer spending, inflation, the currency, and the like, will be very important.
Absolutely. Even as you're saying this, Phumlani, I must throw it back to you, because I think from the economy flows the type and nature, if you will, of politics that is meant to address this, right? Politicians, by their nature, are supposed to speak to us about how, on the one hand, given the many issues we have, how they'll address economic growth, how they'll address that growth being inclusive of South Africans. Two questions for you that I want you to chew on. Number one, the numbers that Bheki threw out, the terrible numbers, high unemployment, a higher than really preferred inflation rate, which impacts, for example, on the cost of things, right? We're seeing abantu, we're seeing people in shops, Phumlani, really second guessing what they pick up in a shop. What used to be staples or basic goods are now becoming unaffordable for a lot of people. Will this impact the politics that we're facing right now, especially in this election that's coming forward?
Oh, yes, definitely. I mean, I like what Bheki has done, which is to lay out the basic conditions of the economy, which are very, very disappointing. And one thing that Bheki didn't mention, I think it was around also the private sector investment in the country. During Ramaphosa's first term, it wasn't good, right? So really, business out there were not investing, right, for stronger economic growth, because it all lies, it all boils down to stronger economic growth, Sihle. And if you get the basics right, if you present the policies, which I'm sure you and I will discuss as to what are those given the nature of the politics. If you present policies that encourage economic growth, then you are going to reduce the problems of unemployment. I have for a long time argued that the greatest crisis that we face in the country is a very staggering unemployment rate, right? A joblessness that really can't be found in many emerging markets. In fact, some say that we have the highest unemployment rate in the world, but it's really astronomical, the levels of unemployment. So, and by the way, we've had periods in this country, when we look back at the past 30 years of our democracy, we've had periods where we've had, lower unemployment rates that were accompanied by strong economic growth. So it all boils down to economic growth. And the idea as to how do you push, Bheki is saying that we've been struggling to grow at 2%. I look at it maybe the other way around and say that we've been struggling to grow at plus 1%, because last year it was 0.6%, if I'm not mistaken. The growth that we had last year, just 0.6%. This was annual economic growth. Now, and think about that, Sihle, and that is very much dismal economic growth, and then we have very much high unemployment rates. And then here's another issue as well, which is what Bheki alluded to, and he can jump in as well, and that is the economic growth we have. It's being outperformed by population growth, right? So in other words, there's that gap where you have a greater population growth, and then we have weaker economic growth. In other words, we have population growth being higher than economic growth, and that's going to be a problem, right? That's why we're going to have our people getting poorer over time, over the years, because we have an economy that is really being outperformed by economic growth. So I would say that it all boils down to stronger economic growth to address the conditions that Bheki was talking about, and that can't be done by, which is what I'm sure we're going to talk about. At least in my view, it can't be done by a huge state interventionist control of government, of the market, and the private sector, and government being the driver of the economy. It can't be done by that, which is what some political parties are proposing.
Well, let's talk about that, because I think that is the nub of tonight's conversation. Often when you talk about the economy, the first instinct, that political parties broadly, which are center-left in this country, the media broadly, which is also center-left in this country, and the chattering classes broadly, which are also center-left. That's the first instinct they gravitate to, is to say, what will government do? What will politician X do to solve the unemployment issue? Bheki, I'm going to throw it to you briefly before we get into those two paths I spoke about, insofar as what the options are for who we vote for and how markets react. There is a growing sense in the broader political lexicon that more state welfare is a good thing. In fact, you'll often hear the ANC celebrate the idea that, oh, look at us, they'll say. We've increased the number of people receiving social grants. Indeed, they'll even argue that social grants go beyond people who are seen historically as, it's a terrible way to describe it, but I'll try and find another way of describing it. But people who are at risk or in need in society, disabled people, older people, children, for example, right? Those are historically the three categories of who receives welfare. In this country, we've expanded that definition to now include anybody. I mean, there's the 350 Rand grant that's given to, it's from the lockdown period, but it's simply carried on and is now being pushed insofar as the language as being a basic income grant. Bheki, it is an unsustainable path that we're heading in, and sadly, politicians in this election cycle are promising more of this.
Sihle, it is definitely a signal of living conditions stagnating and even worsening in the country, where you have people that rely on social grants in the number of about 30 million South Africans, which is about 50% of South Africa's population that rely on social grants, compared to that of the number of people employed at 16.7 million. And the talk that you've mentioned earlier of rolling out social grants, I believe, is the wrong approach in order to solve as well as improve the living conditions of ordinary South Africans. And you also see this as well, not only within the ANC, but as well as that of the DA, that want to also maintain welfare and as well as expand welfare. But I'd also like to take a different approach here, Sihle. If you have an economy that has struggled to surpass 2% over the past 10 years, an economy that has struggled to create jobs over the past 10 years as well, and stagnated as well in terms of employment, the answer to that is not necessarily to cut social grants, as you would be throwing millions of South Africans to starvation as well as that of poverty. The answer to that is what we have touched on earlier on in this talk, in which you grow the economy, in which you increase the number of people employed so that they rely less on social welfare. Millions of South Africans, their aspirations is to get a job in order for them to feed their families and fend for themselves. They want a job. They do not want handouts. They want to work for themselves. They want the decency of employment, as well as that to protect and support their families.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And guys, maybe this prompts us, and I'm going to come to you, Phumlani, in a second. This prompts us to have the conversation, therefore, around what are the options available to us as South Africans? What are the two broad ideologies? And again, I hate to use the word ideologies because there really aren't any per se. I think Bheki rightly made the point that, voting ANC broadly can get you a similar ideological approach as voting DA on issues of welfare, for example, even though, as Bheki rightly said, again, you can't just throw everybody out of that particular boat. It's being created. One has to phase it out. As liberals, we believe in incrementalism and incrementally phasing people towards, a market economy where the jobs are the primary means of earning an income. But again, I'm waffling. Let me get to my question. As Phumlani, there are two broad areas of choice, therefore, that people can vote for, and both will have impact and effects on the economy. Let's talk about the first, which I think is the headline of this video, the possibility of an ANC-MK Party and EFF coalition. You tweeted recently that this is a prospect that you see likely happening. Talk to us about it. And
it might happen. I'm not saying it's like it might happen. We shouldn't, discount it.
Fair enough. But
yeah.
talk to us about broadly the policy position of these three parties and why it would be a massive problem for an economy like ours.
Yeah, just before I do that, I want to touch on the points that was made by Bheki, on the fact that if you have close to 30 million people, and you can't just stop grants and because they will slip into poverty. Yeah, that point is a valid point. My greatest concern is that I do not see a strategy and targets from our government, from our leaders, to say, okay, by X year, we want to be able to create, to create, to have certain stronger economic growth, X amount of economic growth, and also we want to create, we want to be able to move X amount of or Y amount of people from welfare into jobs. I always struggle to see those targets, to say by this year we want to have moved Y amount of people from welfare into jobs, right? That you don't see it. Instead, the social grants are being celebrated. They are seen as an achievement. Over the past 25 years of our democracy, there was no serious intention to say by this year we want to slash social grants and move people into jobs. And I think that national goal is needed. But so long as you don't have it, you always keep on saying, well, we can't cut it until we have jobs and all these kinds of excuses without having a plan and targets. I think targets are very much important. Now, you've spoken about the ANC-MK um, EFF,
EFF. Mm.
such a possibility, that would not be good for South Africa's economy and prospects, and to achieve a strong economic growth environment. Because remember, all of these, I would say, most importantly, the NC and the EFF and the MK, they are really proposing more sort of interventions in the economy. In fact, they want to hike things like minimum wage laws, which I believe, by the way, we shouldn't have minimum wage laws in this country, given the fact that we have the highest unemployment rate in the world. But they want to push up minimum wages to something like plus 5,000 rand. This is the MK and the FF, something more than that as a national minimum wage. They want to they want the state to be the controller of things like land, and not allowing people to be the driver of their destiny when it comes to land ownership. Because it begins with those basics, Sihle. You've got to have a culture of saying, how do you empower people? By the way, many of them, they are poor people in the country, and there are many, it's black people who don't have title deeds, who don't have land ownership, who cannot be productive. If you want to empower them, if you want to empower black people in this country who have been disadvantaged in many ways for a very, very long time, then give them that sense of stronger property ownership, and a sense of accountability, and a sense of title deeds. But they want the government to be the controller of them, of land. And they very much advocate for black economic empowerment, which I think has been very much a negative for our growth in the country, where we've had a limited small number of people who have benefited from the system itself. Sihle, I always say that the biggest scam in South Africa's democracy over the past 30 years has been BE, right? In the sense that you've had this small group of people who have largely benefited, and black people who are poor on the ground, they haven't gotten really much out of such a system, and they still want to advocate for such policies. So I'm not sure if that is the way to go. I strongly believe that the way to go is to really push for a thriving private sector, even in healthcare. The fact that these guys, they propose or they advocate for the national health insurance, that is going to really have a huge negative impact on the private healthcare sector. To me, that is concerning. We don't need more. We need a government that sort of, yes, of course, the basics can be there in terms of provisions and all that, but allow the private sector, Sihle, to be the driver and make it grow.
I want to unpack some of these points because I can see questions coming in. And even as I say that we're in the final 5 minutes of the show, I'm going to kindly ask my guests if they can indulge us just with an extra 10 minutes, please, because I'm seeing questions, and Phumlani, a lot of those questions are stemming from what you've said, and I think it's important to unpack lezinto. Before I get to the questions, let me just remind my guests, you're watching the Big Daddy Liberty Show. My name is Sihle Ngobese, aka Big Daddy Liberty. I'm in studio with Phumlani Majozi, political analyst and analyst generally, someone who you should be following his writings. He has a book out, Lessons from Our Heroes, Past Heroes, which I really encourage you to please buy at your nearest bookshop. And of course, Bheki Mahlobo, economist extraordinaire. As we unpack the question, there's a broad question here. Elections have consequences. What will it be, South Africans? Is it the direction of ANC-EFF and MK Party, which are as things stand, if we look at the polling, the lion's share of the voting count, or the multi-party coalition, broadly speaking, of the DA, Freedom from Plus, IFP et al. That's the question we're unpacking here. If you have a question, please pop it in the comment section whether you're watching this on X, YouTube, Instagram, or on Facebook. Welcome to it. This is the Big Daddy Liberty Show. As I said, guys, there's a few questions here. Let's unpack a few things we've spoken about. Broadly speaking, Phumlani has outlined the two visions, really. The one vision in reality is more government, more state intervention, more government directing facets of the economy, whether it's healthcare, education, property issues, etc. It's the idea of making the government bigger and politicians more in control, and the individual smaller and more irrelevant in reality. That's the one vision that is being sold, and you'll find that in the likes of about ANC, EFF, MK Party, and other parties, to be honest. And then there's the other vision, which says actually you grow an economy by allowing it more freedom. The idea that the individual, and really I talk a lot about the individual, but really we're a family society. So allowing families the ability to create more opportunity, families to create or find more opportunity in the private sector, whether as an employee, earning an income, or as an entrepreneur, earning an income. And from that income, building household savings, from those savings, building their ability to buy services, goods and services in the economy. Those are the broad strokes here. And Phumlani made a few points, which I think have sparked some questions here. And I'm going to go into these questions. I'm seeing Phumlani, his namesake, here in the comments, saying, generally speaking, when it comes to the ANC, EFF, and MK Party, that can never coexist, he says. It would be akin to clay, iron, and glass as a coalition. That's a good point. We do know, Phumlani, that these three parties, regardless of their ideological similarities, have personalities in them. A one Jacob Zuma, a one Cyril Ramaphosa, a one Malema, who actually don't really like each other. Do you want to just quickly speak to that very quickly?
Oh yeah, me speak to that.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, sure. Look, I mean, that is true. That may be true. But Sihle, remember, in politics, there are no permanent enemies. There are no permanent friends as well. So you never know.
Absolutely.
I'm not saying this thing is going to happen. I'm just saying that let's be open to that possibility that we could get that, because it seems like people, they are just dismissing it by saying, well, they're not going to work together because they don't like one another. You never know. I mean, how these people what could transpire post post the election. Any possibility can take place, can happen.
I'm going to get to another question here, or a statement, which I'll throw to the both of you. I'll let you, Bheki, have a first bite at it because it's relating to the economy. From Uzamuxolo Ngubane saying, umnotho vele awukho kuthina, akusizi ukuthi siloku sizikhathaza ngawo. Oh gosh, guys, space, please, guys, space these things. Sizikhathaza ngawo. It should be two words there. I think that's a valid point, Bheki. Let me just quickly translate the idea of, it doesn't help, as Uzamakolo says, that we concern ourselves continuously about the economy. What we want is a complete freedom, if you will, for us to then do things for ourselves. That's Zamakolo Ngubane. I'm going to extrapolate that they're looking for more control, if you will, for the individual, more control for us as citizens when it comes to our economic destiny. Is that really what we really want, Bheki, or should we be actually clapping for and asking for more state control?
I don't think more state control is the answer to South Africa's success over the next 5 to 10 years, Sihle. And in honesty, I see this with many millions of South Africans, young South Africans in particular, which face the highest unemployment rate at close to 70%. I think these individuals are hugely economically excluded in the country. They're frustrated, and you see this as well through them, particularly them not voting for any political organization, because they feel as if these parties have not answered their questions, such as how are we going to get jobs? How are we going to get better education? And how is my life as well as my family life going to improve? Those questions have not been answered, resulting in party support for the ANC as well as other political parties, including that of the EFF, being that it's stagnant at like 10, averaging at about 10% if you look at polling for the past 3 years, as well as at how it's performed in the national polling as well. These individuals are frustrated. They're taking the frustrations to the streets through protest actions, in which we have 30% of all protests which turn violent. And I think what also happens in these elections, the outcome of these elections will also matter for these people, and how these coalition deals are formed and how they answer those questions that I've raised as well earlier on. How do you get the economy chugging along? How do you get South Africa returning to the levels it did previously at 4 to 5%, growing at the same level as global as well as emerging markets? How do you improve living conditions? How do you improve service delivery? How do you improve the lived experience of South Africans as well as the material circumstances of them. When they step out of their own homes, how do you protect these individuals? And with those answers not being answered, they have taken upon themselves to liberate themselves from that failure. And you see this with community watchdogs rising. You see this as well, even with that of electricity, where households put solar panels on their roofs, malls and shopping center put solar panels on the roofs as well as generators.
Yeah.
Movement of goods no longer moving on railway networks and moving more on the road. You're seeing South Africans finding ways to maneuver the hurdles thrown at them by their own government. And I believe that's also what you're seeing in these elections. These elections, the infighting that you see amongst politicians and the like, and the fighting on all, and the talks of coalition deals, this is democracy at work. South Africa entered a democracy in 1994 in which it allowed South Africans to vote out people it believed could not answer and meet its needs, such as that of improving its lives. And I think that's exactly what you're seeing currently.
Again, let me jump into this because the questions are coming in thick and fast. And as I said, in the last 10 minutes, Mr. Lechesa saying, what's wrong with the minimum wage? I'm assuming this is directed at comments made by Phumlani. What's wrong with the minimum wage? You want people to earn peanuts? Can we address this issue? Because when we say we should scrap the minimum wage, this is usually the first retort. You know, it's this idea that if there is no minimum wage, Phumlani and Bheki, people would earn nothing. They'll be slaves.
I can go ahead and answer this question. When it comes to policy, one should not judge a policy by its intention. Of course, we want higher wages for people. We want people to earn a sustainable wage for themselves as well as that for their families. The idea of minimum wages is to increase wages for low-skilled workers, in which the government sets a set price for particular workers in order for them to earn a wage given a particular hour. However, what ends up happening is that you set price in which companies can simply not afford it, and so therefore they choose not to employ more people, which again excludes millions of South Africans from being employed, particularly ones that do not have a formal education, have not made it through education. These are the people that are particularly and most vulnerable to policies such as minimum wages, and which restricts them from them being employed. And this idea that one salary is set on a one stage for a long duration of period I believe, is that also false. When someone enters employment and has the ability to upskill themselves in an economy that is growing, which is quite important, in an economy that is growing, and has opportunity for millions of South Africans, one can indeed improve their lives through work experience as well as learning on the jobs, upskilling themselves, allowing them to acquire higher wages
Absolutely.
along the line.
Absolutely. It's the idea primarily of being more
Sorry.
employable. I'll come to you just now, Phumlani, because I wanted to, as you answer this question, also take into consideration a comment from your namesake, Phumlani here saying, responding to Zamaxolo, saying, you create your own economy. Umnotho wakho kuthina ngoba umnotho awukho kuthina ngoba asikwazi ukwenza. Siphila ngama-grant, too much relying on government on everything. And he also adds to that saying, socialism is the death of black progress. All failed African states applied it and killed their economy. That's why they are all here. Phumlani, I want you to touch on this because a lot of the policies we're talking about here, whether it's the minimum wage or indeed state control of more facets of the economy, come down to this dichotomy of a socialist or leftist or collectivist mindset, the idea that the state and really politicians by extension should control and plan for all things in society. Why is that the problem?
Well, well, the state exists because of what? Because it has to tax people. it gets the money from the people, from you and I. So the idea of a state itself, it means that your earnings that you got from your productivity, the government is going to take it and then and pursue its own inefficient programs. And what are those programs? And by the way, I think Bheki made a very good point that I think he was borrowing from Milton Friedman, who once said that don't judge policies by their intentions, but by their results. So you have a government that takes people's money and then invests it in programs that are in large parts are inefficient, right? You'd rather leave the money to the people so that they are able to use those disposable incomes to invest it, to to buy, to be productive in the economy, leave the money to the people. As Milton Friedman used to say, people know better on how to use their money that they've earned than the government that uses someone else's money. Right?
Absolutely.
So that is, yeah. So that is quite that is problematic. China, when China and people, people they tend to say, look at China. China is a communist state. Socialism works. Whereas China really, the reason why they've grown so fast over the past 35 years or so was because in the late 1970s they embraced some very much key, important free market reforms into their economy. Right. It didn't just go full-blown socialism, right? There were many, free market fundamentals they introduced, and that helped them to grow faster and to reduce the very high levels of poverty that they faced. So really,
Absolutely.
the market, not the state, as the state sort of puts more hurdles in terms of regulations, in terms of very high tax rates that we have right now, and that slows down the economy. So I'd rather leave it to the private sector and business to be the
Absolutely. Guys, we only have 2 minutes left, and the questions, as I said, are coming in thick and fast. Uzaza in real life saying, what policies, and I think it's a good question to almost end off on here, because it's the question of what should be. We've said a lot of what shouldn't be. We've highlighted the dangers of a collectivist or leftist socialist communist dialectic that the ANC-EFF and MK represent, and why that will be destructive for the economy. But Zaza therefore asking the good question. What policies should be implemented to improve our country's standard of living? What can the government do? And really, I will add to that, what can we do as South Africans do to influence the decrease in surging interest rates? That is a question from Uzaza. I'm going to come to you, Bheki, first on that. But just beyond her question, what sort of policies should we be advocating for as South Africans? Let me broaden her question in that regard. And if we have a little bit of time, I'll get to just comments in the end. Go, Bheki.
Sisha, I don't believe that we need to take drastic measures for the country to improve. The trends that we saw in South Africa's early democracy did not take a drastic move for us to achieve high levels of GDP growth. And South Africa can again achieve the success it did in its early democracy. The policies that should be implemented should be policies that move away from expropriation without compensation, the national health insurance, as well as that of prescribed assets, policies that seek to move control towards the state in order for the patriot networks as well as rent-seeking models. I believe the policies that should be implemented are growth-enhancing policies, moving away from policies that decline business in confidence level, increase policies and as well as improve policies that would allow fixed investment to rise and therefore allow GDP growth rates to rise, as well as that of living conditions in the country to improve. Other policies that we should also have a look at is that of education. We have millions of South Africans that are economically excluded because millions of them simply do not have the matric certificate with a 50% mark and above in order for them to enter to university and upskill themselves through education. I believe we should also have a deep look at our education system and improve our education system in the country, which I believe is also can be achieved through the increased involvement in the private sector. And in regards to the private sector, we're already seeing the increased importance of the private sector, in that being that I've mentioned earlier of railway networks as well as that of electricity. The policies that countries should implement in the next 5 to 10 years should be policies that allow investment to occur in the country, that allow growth levels to reach 5%, which would also lead to a massive improvement in employment as well as living conditions in the country.
Sorry about that little delay. Absolutely. Phumlani, I must throw that question to you because I think it's an important one. What should South Africans, the voting South African, the faith, flag, family, freedom type South African, be looking towards, therefore, as a set of ideas, a set of policy ideas that improve their standard of living, and would create a free, prosperous, property-owning and non-racial society? What policies should we be advocating for?
For me, I think I'll be even more specific than Bheki. If I were president of the country tomorrow, if I were to take over from Ramaphosa and be the president tomorrow, I'm fighting for the removal of the national minimum wage. I think the national minimum wage it's not the policy we need in the country. It's very destructive. So I'm scrapping the national minimum wage. BE is in trouble because it's been a corrupt system that has suppressed economic productivity, that has really caused some serious hurdles in the economy. I'm pushing to do away with BE, right? So that must be off the table. Very much in energy, very much, I think right now there's a sense that we are not pushing really on the use of our coal. I think that's very important that we use our coal in the country, right? To keep the lights on. That's very important. And also as well, to encourage the private sector to come up with their own, energy sources. That's very, very important. I think for me, energy, definitely, and push for the coal, I think that's very important. And then the private sector that can produce energy itself as well. We need a stronger energy, free market. Very much in entrepreneurship. I think that's very, very important. And I do believe that both the government and the private sector can work into encouraging and investing in entrepreneurship, as that will create jobs. Because when I move all these 30 million people, or the millions of people that Bheki spoke about, into jobs, right? So we have to cultivate a culture of stronger SMEs that are under serious pressure at this point. Education, very, very much important. Bheki touched on that. Human capital, I call it human capital, because I think that's what it is. Invest heavily in competitive human capital, Bheki. I mean, Sitlem, not just a situation right now where you have at least 81% of grade 4 learners, they cannot read for meaning, right? That's a disaster in our country. How do you create, yes, literacy rates are high, but how do you create over this year and over the long term, how do you create a stronger, competitive human capital investment in education and skills development? That is very, very important. And I'm also going to look at things like the Labor Relations Act, where really, if we can reduce some of the many elements there that make it hard for business to operate, I think that would really help to really fight the unemployment crisis. I call this the crisis, Sihle. The crisis of unemployment in the country is the biggest crisis, I would say, that we are facing, of joblessness. It's a disaster.
Absolutely. And with that being said, guys, we have run out of time. In fact, we've gone over by a few minutes, and I must thank my guests for that. And let me just quickly say this as a final word and something for us to think about, because I will have these guests, back on the show. Remember, every piece of content I put out from now to the election will be elections focused, including the national tour that we're doing. We're going to be talking to you guys about the election. Guys, I want to quickly say this. Whether you choose to vote for ANC-EFF-MK direction, or you choose to vote for the DA Freedom from Plus IFP direction, at the heart of it is South Africans have to remove the belief that politicians are coming to save them. Politicians are not coming to save you. Government and the state are not coming to save you. You are on your own. And in me saying you're on your own, I'm also being dishonest, because in fact, what the market teaches us is that actually with freedom, we can trade amongst each other, we can create opportunities, we can band together as communities to create opportunities that lift more of us out of the poverty that we're facing now. But to do all of that, we have to remove government as a hurdle, because that's what it is right now. It's a hurdle, it's an impediment, it's a block in front of us, and your vote does that. You've got to vote. And in voting, answer the question, what South Africa can be. That for me is the genesis, that is the nub of this particular election. As to what you choose, I suppose will always be up to you. You know me, guys. As I always say on the show, hashtag politicians are trash. I hold no quarter for these individuals. Guys, I'm going to give you both final word and how people can reach you insofar as where they can find your written work or your social media. Phumlani, I'll begin with you.
Yeah, for me, look, guys, go and vote. And that has been my message over the past months. Go and vote. It's a democracy. Don't stay at home. Don't say there's no other option. I hate that, Sihle, where people say, I don't know, there's no one who can do a better job than the ANC. No, there are many parties out there that are contesting the election. Please go and vote. Don't stay at home. Make sure you vote. I do have a website, phumlanimajozi.com. That's where you will find my content. I'm also on Twitter or X as Phumlani M. Majozi. So yeah, I'm also on LinkedIn as well, Phumlani M. Majozi. On Facebook, Phumlani M. Majozi. You'll find me there. I also have a YouTube channel, the Phumlani Majozi Show, something new we are starting out. We shall see how it goes. It looks like it's going well so far. It's growing slowly. It's getting there. So yeah, and also remember to get my book, Lessons from Past Heroes. You can see it behind me here. It's available in all bookstores across the country. And I suggest you get it before the election. Now, I'm not trying to influence your vote, but at least to think about the most important issue. What are the important issues, the most important you should think about before you make your mark?
Absolutely. Bheki, final word, and of course, how do the folks get in touch with you on social media if you want to be found there?
I'd like to echo Phumlani's message and sentiment earlier on. I think you should indeed go out there and vote. Go out there and express your opinion through the ballot box. Express your frustration, or express how let's say, even if you support your party and you want to you put a government in power that you believe will improve your life, go out and vote for that party, and express your opinion through the ballot box. In terms of where you can find me, I'm not on any social media at all, but I do write. Indeed, you can find my work on Business Day and other media channels, as well as when I act here on the Big Daddy Liberty Show.
Absolutely, and a big thank you to the both of my guests as I say goodbye to them. And yeah, guys, you let me know in the comments. I can see the questions are cooking away and the comments are coming in thick. I will read every single comment, so let them come through, please, thick and fast. I do appreciate you, the viewer. You're definitely a part of the show. Let me know what you think of this particular show. If you like the content, whether you're watching this simulcast on X, YouTube, pardon me, Facebook, or on Instagram, then please do me that favor. Hit that like button, smash. Oh, there you go. There's a nice graphic for you there. Smash that like button. And of course, if you're watching on YouTube, subscribe to the channel. All of our content from now going forward will be elections focused. I'm doing a national tour where I'll be talking to you, showing you South Africans from all over the South Africa as to what the issues they are voting on. I want to show you that we're actually more similar than the politicians say we are. In addition to that, we will be inviting politicians, loathed as I am to say that, onto the show and speaking to them so that you can also hear from them directly. We'll be sending invites to them and having them on. A reminder, we have a website. Find us, please, at bigdaddyliberty.com. With that being said, thank you so much for watching. And as I like to say at the end of every show, never trust a commie.